So section 5 is evaluating expressions using integers. The title maybe doesn't tell you a whole lot about what we're actually doing. Essentially, we're looking at order of operations and we're looking at the distributive property. Want to make one comment before we jump into my Roman numeral 1, which will be order of operations, is that word evaluating there at the beginning. If you're asked to evaluate an expression, it really just means figure out what number it equals. So typically you'll get some big, long, jumbled combination of numbers, multiplication, division, maybe parentheses. When they say evaluate it, they just mean do all the math and figure out that it equals like 42 or 7 or something like that. All right, so Roman numeral 1 is order of operations. And I'm sure this is review, so we can take it pretty fast. But it's something that I found even like algebra, we hit order of operations, and a bunch of people struggled on the test we had with it. So it's good review. We could write out the phrase, please.
Please excuse my ignorance.
Does that look familiar to people?
Oh, yeah.
If you know it, don't write it. I'll maybe quick write it because you guys didn't all jump at it. But please excuse. I'm going to write it this way. I'm going to put the my above the deer and the ant above the Sally. And if you change the ant to A-N-T, it's a totally different mental picture.
Or you can please excuse my dead Aunt Sally.
My dead Aunt Sally. If you were feeling a little bit morbid, yep. Okay. The whole point, though, is those first letters. They all stand for something. The P stands for parentheses. The E is going to be exponents. So I'm just maybe going to do E-X-P period, exponents. Nice. Multiplication, division. So I'm just going to do the multiplication, division signs. Then addition and subtraction. With this, if you're going to evaluate an expression, if you're going to figure out how do I combine all these numbers to get just one number, you have to go from left to right. So you start with parentheses, and if there's parentheses, you have to do what's inside the parentheses first. And then you look, is anything to a power? Is there any exponents in there? Then you multiply and divide just going left to right. It's not multiplication all first, then all the division. You typically go left to right. Then same with addition, subtraction, do those left to right. I'm going to do an example. So if we say, all right, an example, we have 8 times 6 plus 2 in parentheses, and then a plus 5. A comment that I want to make, I kind of let the cat out of the bag and said 8 times before I was thinking about it. Right here, often you don't need to have that symbol there. It could just be 8 and then parentheses 6 plus 2. If no math symbol's written between a couple things, you know it's multiplication. Does that sound familiar? All right, so now if we're going to take and solve this thing first, we look at, okay, we do parentheses. So we have to look inside the parentheses. All right, we need to simplify that. And 6 plus 2 is 8. So I have 8 times 8, or you could do 8 parentheses 8 if you wanted to, and then a plus 5. Do I do 8 plus 5 or 8 times 8 next? Yep, because we're done with parentheses. Then you look, are there any exponents? No exponents. So now we do our multiplication and division, this thing here. 8 times 8 gives me 64. And then you have plus 5 for a total of 69. If you show your work and you make one mistake, typically you get a half a point off on the quiz or test. If you don't show your work and you do something in the wrong order and say the answer would be 8 plus 5 is 13, do that times 8. So you get, would be 80 plus 24, so 114. It's like, I'm not going to know how you got 114. I'm probably just going to hammer you points-wise. So show your work, you're more likely to get it right, and it's a good insurance policy if you make a mistake. So the second example, if you can do this one, you should be able to do anything I could throw at you in a quiz or a test. So the second example, I'm going to do a 4 plus, and then a parentheses. Then I'm going to do a 3, and then another parentheses, another left parentheses. Then I do a 5 to the second power. So that 2 is going to be our exponent. That's saying 5 squared. And then a times 2 minus 4.
What are you doing? What are you doing to us?
I am having fun. You're going to love it!
This is not fun. This is
Okay. This is exciting math action. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. We have parentheses. There's 2 sets of parentheses. We have to start in the middle. So we're starting right here. Now, once you're inside parentheses, if there's more than one thing in there, you keep doing order of operations to figure out, all right, what in just this part do you do first? Exponent. So we have to do this 5 squared first, and 5 squared isn't 10, it's 25. We have a 25 right there. And I don't know if we want to rewrite the whole thing. Maybe I'll just kind of be a little bit shady in the writing. But inside that parentheses, we have this 25 times 2 minus 4. Actually, I'm going to write it all. So that's what I'm supposed to do. If you want to be a little shady, I suppose you can. I don't know the difference. All right, what do we do next inside the parentheses? We're still in parentheses. No more exponents. After exponents, please excuse.
Multiplication.
Yeah, my dear. So we do the multiplication next. 25 times 2 is 50. And then we have the minus 4. And then we have the 3. And we have the 4 plus. All right, next step then, finally, we can get rid of that inner set of parentheses. And we have 46. You could write it in parentheses still if you wanted to figure out the next step. How do I combine my 3 and my 46? Multiply. And why do we do that? Well, now we still have this outer set of parentheses. We have to do what's inside there first. If no math symbol's written in, that's a multiplication. So 3 times 46 would be 120 plus 18, 138. And then final step, we have 4 plus that. 4, total of 142. 142. A lot of you don't like doing the steps. There's one way easier than this that the more advanced students, tons of them got wrong on the test. Show your work. Please show your work. It's easy to get cocky and just kind of like jump way ahead, but often you pay. Any questions on order of operations before we do the next thing? Then the last topic to cover in the notes is going to be Roman numeral 2, and that's distributive property. Distributive. Property. Right now, distributive property, how we're going to give it to you right now, seems kind of pointless in a way, but we're trying to get you used to it because we're going to get to a point later on this year where you need distributive property. I'm just going to start with an example. Here would be the example. If you have 4 and then parentheses, and then a 3 plus 5. To solve that using order of operations, first we would do 3 plus 5, and we get 8. And then we do 4 times 8. Our final answer is going to be 32. Good? We can totally do that problem right now. Here's the reason you need distributive property. Soon, you're going to see a question that looks like this here. Can you add together the x and the 5 like we did the 5 and the 3? No. And now when you can't get just one number for inside those parentheses, it doesn't work anymore the way you used to do the math. You have to do distributive property when the x is in there. So that's what's going to kind of be coming down the road. It makes the homework questions that seem a little bit dumb though right now, honestly, because just get the 32. But this is what the distributive property is saying. If you have something times, has to be multiplication or I suppose division there. If you have something times, and then something in parentheses with either an addition or subtraction right here, we have to do the addition and subtraction before we can multiply. If you can't do the addition and subtraction, you have to do distributive. But for now, one option if you wanted to do it with distributive is to say, well, eventually I multiplied my 4 times my 3 plus my 5, right? Because 3 plus 5 gave me the 8. So it has to be 4 times everything in the parentheses. So if you distribute the 4, that's the exact same as saying, all right, I have 4 times 3 plus 4 times 5. 4 times 3 we know is 12. 4 times 5 is 20. And we have to do those in that order. We have to multiply before we can add. Order of operations. Have to multiply before you can add. 12 plus 20 is 32. For now, a lot of the homework questions are just going to be that top part. Take this thing here and write what it would be after you do distributive property. And they're getting you ready for when we start throwing in letters with the numbers soon. Here is officially the distributive property written out. just so you have it written down, distributive property technically says this. For all real numbers A, B, and C, they use letters, so then you know it could stand for positives, negatives, decimals. But if you have A times B plus C in parentheses, I would write this if I were you. So if you have A times B plus C in parentheses, that equals A times B, anyone for finishing it off? Plus A times C. And what they're really saying is you could take that A and you could multiply it times the B and multiply it by the C. Here's the other place where distributive property comes in handy. Up above, I did a problem in my head using distributive property that's way easier than trying to do it without distributive property. And it's this right here. And I don't know if you caught that. 3 times 46, I'd either have to think really hard or I'd have to use a piece of paper to come up with that answer. But I looked at this problem this way. I'm going to slide this over a little bit. And you could write this right up in that question if you showed all your work like I did. You could look at this as though it's 3 times 40 plus 6. Because I can do 3 times 40 in my head, and I can do 3 times 6 in my head. I could do distributive. The 3 times 40 you might be thinking is a little bit, it's like, I can't do that. But what's 3 times 4? 3 times 4 is 12. Yeah, so 3 times 40 you do the same thing, but you have to add the 0 at the end. Does that make sense? And 3 times 6 is just 18. And 120 plus 18 gives you 138. And so if you can start doing more and more math this way, you're able to not have to go to your calculator all the time. You can just get through the stuff quicker, more efficiently. That's it for the section.